Hello, biologists. Welcome back to class. So here's a picture of English ivy. This ivy is climbing over a wall, and it has covered the entire wall with a layer of foliage with its leaves. And that has allowed it to effectively get access to sunlight to perform photosynthesis. The ancestors of this ivy, the algae it descended from, were able to get water, minerals, and carbon dioxide just straight from the water that they lived in. But since this ivy is growing on a wall and not growing in the water, it's going to have to find some other way to get those resources. It'll need to acquire its resources, things like water and minerals, from the soil, where its roots are. It'll need to acquire things like carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, from the air around it. And then it's going to need to be able to transport those substances around the cell and around the organism to where it can survive. So this chapter, we're going to talk all about how plants acquire their resources and how they transport those resources. So plants really live in two different worlds. In the above ground world, they're absorbing carbon dioxide to perform photosynthesis, releasing oxygen, which is a waste product of photosynthesis. They need to control their water loss. So while they have their stomata open to absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, they also don't want all of that water to be lost. They need to be able to get light energy to drive photosynthesis. In the below ground world, plants are developing roots to be able to absorb water, to absorb minerals, and they also can exchange gases through their roots. So the above ground world and the below ground world. And all these parts of a plant, the leaves and stems above the ground and the roots below the ground, they reflect this evolutionary trade-off to be able to maximize these exchanges. In larger land plants evolved vascular tissues, and those vascular tissues allow them to transport materials over long distances. We've already discussed xylem and phloem. Xylem, which transports water and minerals from the roots to the shoots, and phloem, which transports sugar and other products of photosynthesis from the leaves, where the sugar is made, to the rest of the plant, where it will be stored or used. So I just mentioned this compromise between being able to perform photosynthesis and minimizing the loss of water. So leaves are broad so that they have plenty of surface area for photosynthesis, both to be able to absorb light and to bring in carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is brought into the plant through openings called stomata. It brings in the carbon dioxide. It also lets out water and oxygen from that. So when the stomata are open, the plant's able to bring in carbon dioxide, but it also increases water loss. So one thing that plants have evolved is the ability to regulate opening and closing their stomata. So they can open the carbon dioxide when they need, and they can close the stomata to reduce the water loss. That's especially important in dry areas, plants like cacti or sugarcane that grow in areas where they don't want to be losing a lot of their water. The architecture of roots has also evolved to be able to obtain water and minerals. Roots need to be able to acquire essential elements. These are the elements that the plant has to have to reproduce. There are 17 essential elements in plants. Just like essential elements in animals are required for us to be able to grow and maintain health, there's also macronutrients and micronutrients, both of which are vital to the function of a plant. Macronutrients are needed in macro amounts or large amounts, and micronutrients are needed in micro amounts or small amounts. But just because micronutrients are needed in smaller amounts does not make them less important. Both macronutrients and micronutrients are vital for a plant's health. Macronutrients are mainly going to be the components of organic molecules. So this is a very familiar list because these are the same things that it takes to create macromolecules in animals. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, right? That's in all of our biomolecules. Sulfur, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium. Micronutrients are more likely to be cofactors, things that help enzymes be active and be able to function properly. Things like chlorine, iron, manganese, boron, zinc, copper, nickel, and molybdenum. As a plant's roots are going into the soil, it'll actually interact with different types of soil depending on how deep into the soil it goes. And these are called soil horizons. So horizon A, or the A horizon, is often called topsoil. So as being the top layer of soil, it is subject to weathering. So it can be worn away by wind or water. It contains humus. Humus is decayed organic matter. So that means any sort of plant matter or animal matter that has deceased is going to be broken down and form that humus. It also has many solid organisms. So there are beetles there and there are worms there. The A horizon provides the majority of the nutrients and water for the plants. You can even see in this image, it looks much more moist. It's nice and dark. You can see the roots are growing into here. When you get into the B horizon, you don't see quite so many. And into the C horizon, you don't see any roots at all. The B horizon is primarily going to be clay and dissolved elements. And the C horizon is going to be rocks, which form the parent material for the upper layers of soil. The physical and chemical characteristics of the soil will affect plant growth. If you've ever tried to garden or grow flowers, you probably will add things like fertilizer or specific nutrients or amend your soil to have it be what you want for that plant. If there are things like small rock and clay particles, those particles will hold water and they'll hold ions and they'll allow oxygen to diffuse into plant roots. Humus will provide nutrients and will support the growth of organisms to enhance soil fertility. Many plant roots form a symbiosis with other microbes. This could be a fungus, this could be a bacteria. Any symbiosis means that there are two organisms living together. There are a few different types of symbiosis depending on how each organism is affecting the other one. In mutualism, both partners benefit from the relationship. So when we are discussing lichen, we have a fungus that benefits the algae because it is obtaining minerals and helping it stay attached to its substrate. The algae is helping the fungus because it's performing photosynthesis and creating energy. That's a mutualistic association. Commensalism is when one species benefits and the other is unaffected. So you probably have bacteria in your eye that are not harmful to you. They just are living there, so you are unaffected. But the bacteria are benefited because they have a safe home, they have moisture, they have food source for themselves. That's a commensal relationship. Then there's parasitism. Parasitism is what causes disease. Parasitism means one organism gains, the parasite is benefiting, the other is suffering, the host is suffering. So if there is an organism that is growing on you and causing an infection, you are suffering, well, that other organism is gaining, it's being able to grow. Symbiosis in plants is very important because one of the nutrients that a plant needs, nitrogen, is only able to be obtained from the environment through this sort of symbiosis. Nitrogen is an essential element. It is required to make all proteins, so it affects the ability of a plant to grow. It will affect the ability of a plant to produce produce and the quality of that produce that is made. So in this process, nitrogen gas is in the air, N2. This is all over the environment, all over our atmosphere, but plants and animals are not able to use this N2. As much as we need the nitrogen, we can't get it in that form. So there are nitrogen-fixing bacteria that take that into and convert it to ammonia. Then there are ammonifying bacteria that take that ammonia and turn it into ammonium. Then there are nitrifying bacteria that take that ammonium and turn it into nitrates. And as a nitrate, that root can absorb it and use that nitrogen. So this process of nitrogen fixation, taking nitrogen from the air and fixing it into larger molecules that can be used by plants, and then from that can be used by animals or whatever eats that plant. Some plants will form symbiosis with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, such as a legume. This is what it would look like on their roots. Legumes include peas, beans, and alfalfa. They create these nodules, these little bumpy parts that provide an environment for those nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Legumes are going to be specifically forming symbiosis with bacteria in the genus Rhizobium. Alders, another kind of plant, will form symbiosis with other types of bacteria. So Rhizobium with legumes, other nitrogen-fixing bacteria with alders. And these plants that are able to form these associations are going to be rich in nitrogen. So the plants are benefiting. The microbes are also benefiting because they're able to feed on the sugars from the plants that they're colonizing. So the plants are benefiting and the microbes are benefiting. What type of symbiosis is that? Plants can also form mutualism with mycorrhizal fungi. The fungi will benefit the plants first by acting like extensions of plant roots. So you can see here's the root and here are these little filaments of the fungus. It increases that surface area to increase the amount of water and minerals that are absorbed by the soil. The fungus also can specifically absorb phosphates and other minerals from the soil. The fungus can release growth factors. The fungus can also release antibiotics. A lot of antibiotics are actually made by fungi and are able to protect that plant from being colonized by a pathogenic bacteria. Fungi are so important to the growth of plants. It even appears that they evolved with plants, and it is because of those mycorrhizal fungi that plants were even able to successfully start growing on land. There are also some commensal symbiosis of plants. Epiphytes, such as this orchid, are commensal symbionts. So they will grow anchored onto other plants and absorb minerals from the rain. So they are being supported by the other plant, while the other plant is likely unaffected. There are also parasitic plants. A parasitic plant would be something like mistletoe or something like this dodder. The brown vines here on this plant are the dodder. These plants might not even do photosynthesis. They can use their roots to tap into the host vascular system and absorb sugars and minerals from the host plant. So as romantic as it might be to have a little sprig of mistletoe at Christmas time, it actually is doing a lot of damage to the plant that it's growing on. It's probably not something that you want to find in your favorite tree. There's also carnivorous plants. Carnivorous plants are a little bit unique in how they get their energy. They get their nitrogen from insects. So carnivorous plants would include something like a Venus flytrap or a sundew plant. They're able to capture and digest small animals, insects, sometimes even larger animals than that. They'll absorb their inorganic elements from the prey. This type of life adaptation is most likely to be found in nutrient-poor environments like bogs, where the water will leach out those nutrients, especially the nitrogen, out of the soil. So in order to absorb nitrogen, those plants get it from the insects. All right, so at this point, you should be able to tell me, why is long-distance transport important in vascular plants? Then think about this question. Some plants can detect increased levels of light that are reflected from leaves of encroaching neighbors. This detection elicits stem elongation, the production of erect leaves, and reduce lateral branching. How do these responses help the plant compete? And also, how do plants benefit from symbiotic relationships with bacteria or fungi? All right, so now we've talked about how plants can absorb a lot of their nutrients, some of the nutrients that they need, and relationships with symbionts. We'll come back in our next video to talk about once they've absorbed them, how are those nutrients moving through the plant? I'll see you in a little bit. Bye.